Hello, everybody. This is Dale Matthews. I'm joined by Mike Jones and Bree Malarkey. Bree is in Ashland. Hi, Bree.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes. Okay. So, Mike, you there, bud?
Oh, yes, I am. I forgot to unmute myself. Hello.
Yes. So, Bree is in a very interesting position. Bree, tell us what kind of business you're in and why today is especially different for you, please.
I'm an herbalist. I've been studying plant medicine for about 10 years, and I just retired from homeschooling my children. And in my retirement, I decided to open an herbal medicine dispensary. So we have over 50 different herbs in our plants, and I'm a big believer in knowing where your foods come from, know your local farmer. So I really wanted to profile medicinal herbs from the Rogue Valley that can be grown here or wildcrafted in the Siskiyou Mountains. And one of the herbs I decided to include in our dispensary is cannabis. And there's a lot of political opinions about cannabis, but as a healer, I strongly believe it's the most medicinal herb in the world. And I really wanted to include the plant alongside other healing herbs and plants from our region to educate people about its medicinal benefits.
I would imagine the brisk business is in the cannabis side of this issue, at least right now. Is that not the case?
Well, it's very limited where people are allowed to have safe access to cannabis. So we are really a place where people are very interested in learning about it. And so, yeah, it's one of the main reasons why people come in. They can get medicinal herbs from lots of other shops too. But one of my greatest joys is helping people learn about the combination of herbal allies that can work together to help people.
A
Mm.
combination of herbal allies. That's Mike and I, too.
Yes, right. Yes,
Yeah.
you more than me. I'll say.
Yeah, right. Now, Thursday was the first day. That was October 1st. The first day of, Bree's going to tell you the first day of what. And today, for her, was different. It was a religious experience. It's the first time that she's ever been open on a Sunday. Bree, tell us what the first was and what today was like for you.
Well, on the first, the state legislature, as everybody knows, Measure 91 passed about a year ago in November of 2014 here in Oregon, and that allows for adult use or recreational cannabis use. And the legislature realized that the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, who's been tasked with opening these adult use stores, was not going to have their act together until probably September of 2016. So almost 2 years after the voters passed it. So this legislature passed a Senate bill allowing medical marijuana dispensaries that are in good standing to be able to serve a very limited supply of cannabis to all these users out there. And that started on October 1st. So down here on the 4th, it's a Sunday, we decided to be open here at our Ashland location just to see if there was a need for people in the area. And we've had
Right.
a steady stream of people all day.
So did you finally have to, like, don't allow any new people in and deal with all the people at the end of the day?
Yep, we've had to lock people in with us so that nobody else could come in, and then open the door to let them out one at a time. I don't know. It was really hard for us to gauge the demand. This is the Napa Valley of cannabis here in Southern Oregon. We grow it really, really well, and we didn't know how many people already had access, how many people were going to be interested. I think there's a lot of people that haven't tried it since the 60s. We were hearing quite a few stories of people who said, yeah, I tried it a little bit in college, then I became a professional, and now my body hurts and I need help. So we're getting a lot of great stories of people that are looking at exploring it again, and they're really needing a lot of consultation and advice because they haven't had it. And, back in the 60s, they didn't know what they were smoking. They didn't know what they were putting in their body. There wasn't lab testing. There wasn't pesticide analysis. There wasn't essential oil, terpenoid analysis. So I think people are really interested in they understand the wives' tales, they understand the lore of cannabis, and matching that with modern science to learn a little bit more about its uses.
Now,
So,
Mike, just a second. Mike, now you're from the Napa Valley. Did you
Yes,
ever
sir.
used to experiment with marijuana? You know, test tubes and drinking
Yes, yes, all the time. Uh,
drinking
so
turpentine, like she was talking about?
yes, no, not really, no. Uh, Now let me ask you, it has to be a lot different now because there has been a lot of development, shall we say, and the THC content, things of this nature are a much different thing than they were 30 years ago.
Well,
So,
I would just say that I don't know if that's entirely true. I've
mm,
heard that quite a bit, but I would argue that they weren't necessarily doing testing. I think that you also have plant breeders that have been selectively breeding for different characteristics and traits. But
mm.
we do see anywhere from 7%, 5% THC, all the way up to 27% THC
Oh,
coming in.
wow.
So as an herbalist, what we do is we take the full test result and analyze that particular batch and then try to match that particular strain for people to be able to use for their specific ailments or symptoms. And there's a lot more than just THC. There's over 85 different cannabinoids. There's all those essential oils I was telling you about. And the plant can work synergistically together with all the different aspects to help people.
So
Uh,
what kind of people they were looking for what today over the last few days? Were there people coming in saying, "Oh, I thought you were doing this and now you're not," or what were people looking for? What are you selling? Every entrepreneur should have this problem. What were you selling over the last couple of days, Bree?
Well, I think Mike and Dale, when you guys go out for drinks with friends, you're going to pick the ambiance of the location that, you like. You might want to go to the biker bar, you might want to go to the golf club. Just depends on the feel that you want from the proprietor. And I think the same thing is going to be true for any dispensary that you go to. For me, I really wanted to build a dispensary that was like a boutique, an artisan place that was very committed to organic and sustainable agriculture. I wanted a place that all generations would feel comfortable. So perhaps the people that gravitate to my stores are looking for that type of ambiance. But I am seeing a lot of baby boomers, more traditional generation, that is looking for help sleeping. There's a lot of people with anxiety. There's a lot of people with severe migraines, back pain, a lot of veterans. It's amazing how many veterans are out there, and many of them are coming here because of something that happened to them during their service. So it's been very gratifying to be able to help them.
Let me ask you, how does that work? If somebody's coming in and they're having problems sleeping as opposed to, they have pain in a particular place, do you help them somehow in a manner of speaking, prescribe them to use a certain amount? Or how does that work? What does that look like? You're talking to somebody over the counter.
Sure, that's a very great question. We're really trying to help enable people to do the research on their own, a little trial and error. So what we do is, like I said, I take those full test results and I analyze based on different science, different knowledge. The terpenoids and the terpenes, the essential oil of the plants, are available in the whole plant kingdom. So you could have linalool, which is also found in lavender, and studies have shown scientifically, double-blind, peer-reviewed studies, that linalool can help reduce anxiety attacks. So if we have a cannabis strain that comes in with a lot of linalool, then we've identified that maybe as somebody who needs help with anxiety relief. Anyway, I could go on and on about how we identify how it may help somebody. We also take a lot of
But if somebody comes in and they have that specific problem, you would recommend that particular strain to them then?
we will tell them that for many patients, they've reported that this might help them with XYZ. And then we encourage them to really start with a very small dose, keep a journal, keep track of whether or not you had food or not. Make sure you're in a safe environment. Take if you're trying vaporizing or smoking, take a little quick inhale and then wait an hour and see if that was the proper amount that you needed for your body. And there's a lot of people that don't like to smoke. I personally can't be too close to a campfire. I don't want smoke near me.
Mm.
So there might be people that want to make lotions or topicals. And so we have recipes to help people, to help guide them in making their own products, because we're not allowed to sell or offer any extracts or topicals at this point, only the dried herb.
So what's the difference in effect between a topical and something you smoke or
By the way,
vaporize.
a topical is something that you would rub on
Right.
yourself, right?
Yeah. So that's
Understood. Thank you very
Well,
much,
no,
Dale,
no,
for
I
that
know Mike
definition.
knows. I know all of you know, but there could be a couple of people in the audience that's topical, you know.
right. So
That's true.
we call that a transdermal application. So, the dermal layer actually doesn't
Mm.
bypass the blood-brain barrier. So you're really localizing a lot of those cannabinoids. You can't get high from applying it on the skin. I have to tell you a really cute story if you have a moment. We had this little old lady come in about 6 months ago to our Gold Hill location, and she had severe arthritis. I mean, she couldn't undo her hands, and she was really, really afraid of feeling high. She didn't want to be scared and didn't want a negative experience, but she was in so much pain, and the pharmaceuticals were giving her so many side effects. She wanted to try the herb, and so we made her a special salve, and she tried it, and she put it on, and then she said she sat down in a chair and she waited, and she waited, and she was starting to get so upset because she wasn't feeling anything. And she just realized she could open her hands and she wasn't having
Oh,
Oh,
pain.
wow.
It was the most wonderful testimonial. So for most people, I haven't heard of one report. It does not go into the blood supply. I've
Mm.
been told it is not detected by drug tests because it
mm.
stays localized where you apply it, whether you have severe pain in your shoulder. I really think our legislators, our policymakers should allow us at our medical dispensaries to offer lotions and topicals to the general public because
Mm.
there's very low risk of children eating a lotion, and it can be so helpful, especially for older generation.
Now,
Right.
speaking of the legislatures, you have a special situation in Gold Hill. Okay, so you've got a store where you are now in Ashland.
Correct.
I've often said the difference between Ashland and Grants Pass is Ashland has cute little candle stores, while Grants Pass has cute little tire stores.
But you have
Um,
really cute bears too. I love your bears.
well, yes, we do have
That's
bears.
true.
That's true. Yes, uh, um, and so it's a slightly different situation in Gold Hill, and that's an interesting situation that's different than any other place in the state. It has been, and now it's morphed into something else. Can you give us a general idea of what's happening specifically? Because we now cover the Gold Hill City Council meetings. What's happening in Gold Hill with you?
Well, that's a very good question, and there's a lot of different people with different ideas of what's happening in Gold Hill. And first of all, I just want to say it's an absolutely wonderful community. It's very close to our farm. We live out in the country, and I liked Gold Hill for placing my dispensary because A, it's close to home. I still have children that I have to be with. But it's right in between Medford and Grants Pass, and it's easily accessible off of the freeway. And one of the things that's really important for all your viewers to understand is even though I'm working 100% within the city's program and the state's program, I'm still viewed as somebody who is dispensing a controlled substance. And the federal government puts us in the same bucket as mafia and cocaine dealers and all those bad guys. So we're not allowed to have bank accounts. We're not allowed to write off any of our business expenses like our employee wages or our mortgages. And what that also means is that a lot of landlords and people who own commercial property are unwilling to rent to our kind because they're afraid of their bank note or their mortgage note being called by the lender because a lot of banks are FDIC insured.
Oh,
So this
wow.
brings me to finally answering your question. We were driving through to get back home to a Shady Cove where our farm is located and saw a for lease sign at my location in Gold Hill. And the woman who owns the building owns it outright. And so she was able to make a decision based on her and her family, and she believed in holistic natural healing. And I think there's another acupuncturist in the building as well. Uh, so so it worked out, the landlord was more than willing to rent. It was a great location for me. I felt like it was located in a wonderful area. And so I went to apply for my business license, and that evening, actually, the city was slated to talk about putting a moratorium. This was in the spring of 2014, in place, a moratorium to ban dispensaries. So I went to the city council meeting and I explained to them my vision, what I was wanting to build and what I was wanting to create. And they decided to put the moratorium talk on hold until the next city council meeting, but instructed the city manager not to issue me a business license. So they had time to think about it. And at the next city council meeting, they decided to go ahead and put the moratorium in place because I think they were being advised by their council that a moratorium had to be in place by a certain date or they couldn't do a moratorium. So they decided that what they wanted to do was put a moratorium in place. Well, they worked on building a business license or an ordinance specifically for dispensaries. At the time, I remember thinking, I don't want to be a pot shop. I want to offer this beautiful holistic medicine place for people. But I understood that what if I was no longer able to run my business and somebody else came in? I mean, I couldn't say how they would run their business. So I have a degree in public policy and planning and management from the University of Oregon. And even though I've been a mother and an entrepreneur my whole life, I have an understanding of what our city officials need to go through. So I worked with the city council over the next 60, 90 days to help develop a medical marijuana business license. And I told them all the things I was going to be doing. And we used other cities in California, Colorado, Washington, because, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We can look at other best practices to try to ensure that whoever was going to run the one dispensary in Gold Hill, because due to zoning and school zones there could only be one, would be a good neighbor. So we put in hours of operation, that all my employees have to have background checks and other various things within the parameters of time, manner, and place restrictions that were allowed by the legislature. But when all was said and done, the city council decided to put a 5% sales tax on the sale of any medical marijuana. And I think the reason they decided to do that was because there were so many people in the community that were really, really afraid that there would be an increase in crime, that property values would go down, that there would be big issues as a result of me opening.
But that's a very unusual step for them to put any tax on you. Wasn't the first one in the whole state?
And they're currently, it's my understanding, they're the only ones that had an active sales tax. I think there were some cities who passed a sales tax, but then it didn't allow anybody to open. So, I've been the only one. They earmarked the funds for public safety. So they put all the funds in a public safety fund, or at least that's what they said they were going to do, because the community does not have any city law enforcement. And I knew from looking at California, from Washington, that medical dispensaries don't increase crime. But I think the local residents needed proof. And they said, well, in a year, let's revisit this. And so I came to them in November. I came to them every 6 weeks or so, or 90 days or so, and asked them to remove the tax, because many of these people, as we've already covered, they have an option to go get pharmaceuticals, to go get OxyContin, to go get a pharmaceutical drug. And if they went to the Gold Hill Pharmacy, there would be absolutely no tax. But if their doctor or if that person wants to make a decision to try a more natural, holistic herb, they now have to pay a tax. And, I'm a Democrat. I'm going to be complete. I believe in appropriate and responsible taxation, but just to charge one group of people just because you think there might be a problem, I feel like that's discrimination. But also,
yeah, I agree with that. You have a situation where the law has been passed, which puts you on the same plane with the pharmacy across the street, essentially, in the eyes of the people once you pass that law, and then now they're taxing you at 5%. So are they still doing that, or what's the deal?
That's a great question.
14 months later,
yeah,
instead of a year, 14 months later, they're going to have a fellow come in and just talk to them. You may remember this because we've shown this video on our show. And he comes in, and before he really can say anything, they decide to take a vote. It's not listed as a vote. Nobody knew it was going to happen, and then they got rid of it. And then I talked to them a little bit, and we did our show. And they were kind of like, well, yeah, maybe we didn't do that right. Go ahead, Bree.
I'm under the impression from my business license ordinance that the tax rate can be set by council resolution. So I'm not sure with the rules of order, how they're supposed to set that tax rate, if they want to put it at 0 or 5 or 10, what process they need to go through. But they did an analysis. I'm not sure, I'm not part of the city government, and looked at crime over the last 14 months and realized that it wasn't coming from our patients. It wasn't coming from the people that were coming to Breeze Botanicals. So people come, people go. It's like a pharmacy in that we're just dispensing. There is no on-site consumption allowed at all. And many of these people, are just taking it home and using it at home.
Now, one of the city councilors said that you're in the property right next to her, and she says, they're not making any even noise. I don't even know they're there. Not only is there not a problem with law enforcement, they're really good neighbors. And she said to the others, look, I'll tell you personally, these guys are no kind of problem. But their only problem was procedural. And then they said, okay, I guess we're going to have to do that again, because they took the vote wrong. They didn't tell anybody they were going to vote, and they have to notify people. So they said, well, we'll bring it back, and we'll do this again. But somehow, your lawyer, it's Bob Graham, isn't it?
Yes, Robert Graham, yeah.
Yeah, we're familiar with Bob. Somehow, your lawyer has, I guess, given you the advice that you ought to kind of jump on them a little bit when it looked like at their next meeting, all they were going to do is say, okay, now that we're doing this properly, tax is over.
Well, that's not what I was told. I was told that a city councilor has decided to change her vote.
Oh.
That she, because of political pressure from her constituents, had decided to change her vote. And so because of House Bill 3400 that says the state can be the sole taxing authority on marijuana, I thought it was appropriate to have my attorney draft a letter saying that, basically you've seen it, I'm sure, that not only do I feel like it's completely wrong and discrimination, that I have there's a group of patients that have banded together and that are willing to stand up as a group to say they felt discriminated against. I know that I was told by somebody in the community, marijuana users are not a protected class of citizens. And I know, there's no laws that say we need to protect them because they choose to use this herb, but they're people. And I don't know if we need laws to justify discrimination. So I asked Robert Graham to write that letter because I wanted the city to know that, A, I don't think it's legal to be charging patients, and I just think it's wrong, and we're ready to stand up for our rights and our freedoms as people.
Now, you're going to go to, I'm sorry, Mike, just one last thing. You're going to go to tomorrow night's meeting.
I have other things I'd rather be doing, but yes.
As I say, you're not going to go. No, you're going to tomorrow night's meeting. Do you anticipate there will be more people there to stand up and speak?
It's a very interesting question. I can't tell you how many people have patted me on the back and thanked me for doing this for them because they're afraid of coming out of the cannabis closet, if you will. They're afraid of discrimination. They're afraid of judgment from maybe fellow church members or their own family. Maybe they work for a government agency. They're afraid of being fired. Maybe they're on low-income housing, and that woman I told you about who just needed the cream for her hands, she lives in HUD housing because she's a very low-income senior citizen. And she got a letter saying that if anybody uses any kind of marijuana, whether it's for medical purposes or recreational, they immediately get kicked out of the facility. And she is so afraid. She is, and that remember, she's only using it on her hands. Sorry, I've been losing my voice. But it just makes me want to cry. She's so afraid, and the pharmaceuticals were making her sick. And she has to make a choice between a place to live, so no, she's not going to.
I don't think that's going to stand a legal test. Ultimately, if it is a legal, even for recreational purposes, at some point that's going to get revisited.
But she's still going to be afraid. Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
Oh, sure, but I'm assuming that once they revisit it, they'll make an announcement that they've done so. Now, what is the future of taxation? Because as I understand it, the state is thinking, okay, we can tax 17% and let the municipalities tax 3% for local. What's the future of that, and do you expect a tax to come on from the state in both of your locations in Ashland and Gold Hill?
I've got two answers to that. The OLCC stores that will be opening later in 2016 will be taxing 17% to the state, and local municipalities or county governments can add on a 3% tax. So that's one scenario. The medical marijuana dispensaries that have been allowed to open to satisfy the needs of the public while the OLCC stores are opening. It is a tax-free holiday between now and December 31st. There can be no taxes. But then starting January 1st, the tax rate goes to 25%. And this
Wow.
law sunsets in December of 2016. This was a temporary thing that our legislators put into place to give the OLCC time to open their stores.
Now you have the meeting tomorrow night. And even if this one lady on the council says, I don't like it, there's a possibility that the others, if they're not upset about receiving the letter, are going to say, look, we've already made up our mind. This is just a procedural thing that we're doing. But there's also another meeting, a workshop meeting, coming up the next Monday night, the week later, workshop, so that you can't speak unless they invite you to. And that'll also be about marijuana. What's that meeting going to be about?
Well, I think that's a brilliant move because if you remember back when I was telling you my story, I went the day to apply for my business license and they said no, you know. So this is great. I think the city council's being proactive and they're thinking about in our community, what are our options? What are we allowed to do? What's important to us as a community? And what do we want here in our town?
Except for one thing, Bree. One of the people attending that meeting will be, he's a guy that's very familiar to Mike and I and everybody at Josephine County. He is the official lawyer of Gold Hill. Mike?
I haven't met him, so I don't know him personally.
Mike, you know who I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
It's Steve Rich.
You guys want information about this guy?
Oh, brother.
Dale's full of information about this guy.
I'm full of something, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, he's full of something. So now, are you just doing the recreational side stuff on your Ashland store, or have you started doing that in Gold Hill as well, or is that going to happen? How's that going to work?
Yeah, we're serving all adults at both locations. And if you remember, over this last year, it's been really hard for me to turn away so many people. We'd get a lot of people in, maybe they were just diagnosed with cancer or they don't have the time to go try to get their medical marijuana card. It is currently taking 8 to 13 weeks for somebody to get a medical marijuana card right now. The program runs at a $9 million a year surplus, and they refuse to hire more staff. And they charge huge fees that are really cost prohibitive for many people. Maybe they just want that cream or they just want to use it occasionally to help them sleep. It's over $300 by the time you pay the state of Oregon, and you find if your doctor's not willing to sign your card, you have to go to one of the compassion centers, because there are some doctors, practices that no matter what, they feel it's a liability to sign a recommendation for somebody to get a medical marijuana card. And there's also a lot of people that are afraid of being on a list. I mentioned that. They're afraid of people knowing they use the herb. So I am so excited to be able to help all people. I would argue that 99% of the people coming through my doors, maybe they know we're healers and we're trying to help, are self-medicating, and they're looking at something to help them in their lives.
Okay, we're fearless on this show. We have to touch on this. You know, there are an awful lot of people who say, well, sure, yeah, all these people have medical marijuana cards. Yeah, we know why they're there. Why? 99.9% of them are just there to get high. So what's your answer to that? You've heard this before, of course.
You know, I can't speak to people that don't go to medical marijuana dispensaries. I can only speak to the people that I've seen and I've helped. And if your listeners could walk in my shoes for a week, they would be awestruck at how many hugs I receive, how many testimonials of people going off 17 prescription drugs down to this one little plant. I would argue that that is a rumor. People will say, oh, everybody's got pain. Well, in Oregon, you can mark on your form as many categories as you want. So, if you have cancer, do you have pain? Probably. If you have PTSD, you might have pain. If you can't sleep at night, do you think your body is going to ache a little bit all day long? So, yeah, the statistics show a lot of people indicate pain, but those numbers are skewed because you can check mark as many items that are qualifying as a debilitating condition. So I haven't seen what you're referring to. There potentially could be people out there that are using the medical marijuana program as a guise, maybe to hide for their illegal activities, but I'm not necessarily seeing them at medical marijuana dispensaries. I will tell you, I've heard many, many testimonials from patients and growers that there is rampant abuse on both sides of both parties. Patients that abuse growers, organic farmers that are just trying to help people. And there are patients that hire somebody to maybe grow them plants that never get their crop at the end of the season. They're taking advantage of.
Oh, wow.
And, we've heard stories from somebody who runs an old folks home that a person came by saying, I will be the caregiver of all these people. And they went through and they signed up all these elderly people.
Oh, no.
And never came back, never brought them any medicine, never brought them any herb. And these people are abusing the medical marijuana program. And what they're doing is they're stacking cards so they can legally drive up and down the freeway.
Sure.
And if they get pulled over, say, oh, I'm helping all these people. And that's what gives the medical marijuana program a bad name, because we have really legitimate caregivers, hospice nurses that need to be able to have caregiver cards. I mean, we need to be able to allow people to be able to help other people. But we have to figure out ways to keep this abuse under control. And we don't want to get away from the medical marijuana program because there's so many people that need help. And actually, I'll be lobbying our legislators during the short session in January to add these topicals and lotions to the acceptable list of what we can provide to adults. And I would really like to see some sort of program to help low-income people. If this program is really operating at a $9 million a year surplus, why can't we use some of these funds for some of our veterans? Or why can't we use some of these funds to help people who really need help? And I think there's a way that we can build a responsible program within our state with responsible dispensaries to make sure these people are taken care of.
Okay, Bree, hold on just a second, because Mike and I are going to talk about you behind your back. Mike, I like this lady. No, you're not supposed to be listening. I like what she's doing. I like her attitude about this. She's being straightforward on all this kind of stuff. It's been a super busy day, their very first Sunday, and this is a problem every entrepreneur should have, as I said. I mean, they're bursting at the seams with all this stuff. That's fantastic, but we probably should ask her a couple of tougher questions.
All right.
Do you have one for her, Mike?
Well, I do have a question about supply. How do you go? Are you growing this stuff yourself? Do you have people that are growing it for you? How does that work? And if somebody wanted to grow for you, could they do that and then come to you? Or how does that whole thing work? Because up to now, this has been either only from medical growers. Are the medical growers branching out into recreational, and what are the guidelines for those different things, if you know anything about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's patients. We're not allowed to purchase anything from anybody other than a patient. So patients who have excess medicine can bring it to a dispensary, or they can authorize their grower or their caregiver to do it on their behalf. And that's how we get excess. So yes, we have a little bit at our farm, excess from the few patients that we serve, but we're very committed, like I told you at the beginning of the show, to supporting farmers in our region. So what are people growing locally? I really wanted to support the economic viability of our region. And I think that the Rogue Valley is a beautiful place, and I think, we have been natural resource dependent for decades. The timber industry has fallen through, and I really wanted to give an opportunity to some of these small farmers and local patients to have a place to sell their excess medicine. And I knew that companies or people that had started product lines in California and Colorado and Washington would be infiltrating Oregon, trying to get their businesses established here. But I really believe in supporting maybe somebody who's been making brownies for a long time, and she's really worked very hard, or he, in perfecting their craft and helping them start their businesses and teaching them about product liability insurance, teaching them about public, how to keep their product line safe. And so it's been one of my greatest joys to help a lot of people start businesses with their excess medicine, and I hope that answers your question.
Oh, I got one for you now.
Okay.
We need to introduce this lady to the Small Business Development Center here in Grants Pass, Mike.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, although I've been accused of not knowing anything about economic development. Okay. Bree, we need somebody like you to give details of what your experience has been in other places. And one place that desperately needs that is the Grants Pass City Council. What's the possibility that we can somehow convince you? I'm not asking you to argue for one side or another. You've got your own side. What's the possibility we could inspire you to come to a Grants Pass City Council meeting? I'll tell you when they are if you like, so that you can explain to everybody what the reality of the situation is.
I would be happy to help. I would like an invitation from the city, though, if they're interested in the work session, a little bit more.
Yes.
And I invite all the policymakers. We're open to all adults now, so I invite everyone in Josephine County to come and see what we're doing. And I think it's very challenging for policymakers. We're at the forefront of change, and they're trying to balance all the needs of their constituents. So, you've got a lot of people that have lived with 70 years of prohibition rhetoric, the propaganda, the reefer madness, and then you've got a lot of forward thinkers, people that have been around cannabis, or maybe it's touched their family and they've witnessed how it can be helpful. And you've got these two groups colliding, and our policymakers need to try to balance the needs of the community. And I think instead of banning this new industry, they should work at ways to develop policy. And that's why we elect them, right? We elect them to be leaders, and we elect them to represent our communities. So I think, the more that if there's anybody listening to the show that is in a position of power, take the time to be a leader and develop policy that can welcome people like myself, or to ensure that people that maybe are wanting to open a pot shop are going to be good neighbors. And, all you do when you ban things is make people mad, and you encourage illegal activity. So why punish law-abiding businesses and law-abiding citizens that want to be able to come together for a legal taxable transaction? So I would be happy to come speak, but I would want an invitation, because I'm opinionated and I like to share it, but I want to make sure they want to listen to it.
Well, you're a good representative of your position. Bree Malarkey, thank you for talking to us about this subject. We don't want to make this the last time. We'll talk to you for a few minutes every day now. Mike, do you have anything in summary to say, bud?
It's basically covered it for me. I think, listen, there's a lot of people that this sort of thing rubs the wrong way, and
they need a topical.
Yeah, right. But the thing is that this is a legal thing now.
It is.
So,
right. And if you don't like it, you lost the vote. This is America. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
Yeah, and this is just one of the things, and learn to peacefully coexist with it. I'm a libertarian thinking sort of person, and I think the free market decides, and that happens by choice. One of the vote, and the next thing in the marketplace. Right. So we're going to see a lot from this in the next few years. Is going to tell us, how this is going to work.
And I'm going to end on this note. Okay, I'm going to end on this note because we're out of time now. So your partner was at the first Gold Hill City Council meeting I went to, and he said, when we first started doing this, I saw a young hipster walk in the door, and I thought, oh boy, he's probably just here just to buy some weed or whatever. But then this kid turned around and was helping his grandmother in the door.